what you see right here was final poster that went out for the Figma launch in India event. So the brief and the idea here essentially was to get the essence of India, its culture, and I think the initial idea was kind of revolving around Bollywood and the colors and the history that India brings. I'm going to quickly jump into my initial dump of ideas and how it actually got there. So the idea essentially was to reimagine the Figma canvas in this isometric spatial format. So you can see the tool navigation bar here. So they're entirely drawn on Figma. They are not really components, they're individual elements. If I kind of jump down here, you can see each of these are groups, a bunch of elements that you see. There's a person here. Each of these are different bits that I've individually drawn that I kind of stitched together.
Oh my God. Hey folks, this is Jay and welcome to Deep Dive. Today with me I have Shreya, who's a product designer at Groww, and she is going to show us the illustrations that she created for the Figma office launch in India and how she used Figma Draw to do all of this. Shreya, super stoked to have you on.
Hi, Jay. Super happy to be on this session as well.
I saw so much hype, so many videos, so many footages of the Figma event in Bangalore, and I was like, man, I wish I could have attended it. And super excited to kind of see the work you did for Figma for the event.
Yeah, I think it was a very fun project for me as well. Like I said, I think I'm a product designer for most parts of the day, and I do that on Figma. But lately, like you said, I've been illustrating on Figma as well. So to kind of do two very kind of different things on the same tool and then kind of get it to do it for them was super cool for me. And to kind of have it see it there on the big screen and see it come to life. I think it was a fun project overall, I think. Although we did it over a very quick and short period of time, I think I had fun.
Amazing. And how long did the project take from start to finish for you to create these illustrations?
Right. So I think this one specifically was a very tight and quick project. So I think I would say I must have spent about 2-3 days on the initial drafts and ideas, and we went through a bunch of feedback loops, and then about 2-3 more days again to kind of stitch everything up together, post the feedback loops. I'd say a week and a half overall, but in general I think it was a very tight project, so I didn't get to loop around a lot in terms of iterating, which I usually do, but I think it helped me figure newer and quicker ways to kind of navigate through that as well, right? Because I'm kind of having to churn and generate ideas quick on a tighter timeline, so it was new for me as well. Yeah,
let's quickly look at the final designs you ended up creating, the final illustrations.
Yep. So I think what you see right here was the final poster that went out for the Figma launch in India event. So the brief and the idea here essentially was to get the essence of India, its culture, and I think the initial idea was kind of revolving around Bollywood and the colors and the history that India brings, and that was the brief that I had. And of course, to tie Figma in it, so that's how it became the Figma Cross India theme on it. So the idea was essentially to create a poster along these lines.
This is the final illustrations that you handed off to the Figma team. What I want to see is, what was your first iteration like? After you got the brief, what was the first concept you came up with?
Right. So this is the final poster, but I'm going to quickly jump into my initial dump of ideas and how it actually got there. So what you see really early on is kind of very far away from what I just showed you a while ago. So this was the initial draft. So I make a lot of isometric illustrations, which is essentially illustrations that follow a certain perspective at 30-degree angle, and they're kind of you're viewing it from the top. So the idea essentially was to reimagine the Figma canvas in this isometric spatial format. So you can see the tool navigation bar here, or the people here are not essentially entirely human. They have the cursors that you see when you have people working on the same file as you. So smaller elements like that, where I'm imagining Figma, the rulers, the scale in this 3D isometric kind of spatial plane, and kind of bring in bits of India, some elements architecturally, and And I think a lot of the India bit you'll probably see when I go to the more final results where there's a lot of color, pattern, and texture, which I've kind of bring in.
Yeah, I see that. Like the pillars that you have, they're very like typical designs you see of pillars at homes in India. Like I just noticed that the pillar design that you have, then you have the animal walking on the road or the street, whatever that's outside. So it's I can see how you're capturing the cultural aspect. Now, a new question for you. You mentioned about isometric design. I am not familiar with that a lot. So my new question to you is, what happens if you don't use isometric perspective and there's nothing like that? What happens?
Yeah, I mean, it could be like a flat 2D design as well. But so like I said, this is kind of the style that I have been working in. So it's something I wanted to bring in because it brings the depth to a rather 2D illustration because it's in, at an angle, it's in space, right? So it brings that spatial form.
Okay.
And using that kind of, I don't know, it's a cheat way to kind of give me more depth and space within this fixed canvas because I'm kind of going inside, say, you can see there's space within this door or archway, right? It's not flat. So I'm kind of creating more space within the existing canvas or space that I have, which kind of helps me bring the level of detail that I'm trying to do because I'm creating like space within a space. So that helps.
Question there. Like those archways that you created on the second level floor or those things that I see there where the person is standing, the trees, are these like components you first created in Figma or these are things you just like use Draw to create them or like what was that process for creating all these elements that I see here?
Yeah, so they're entirely drawn on Figma. They are not really components, they're individual elements. If you see, if I kind of like jump down here, you can see each of these are like groups, a bunch of elements that you see. There's a person here. Each of these are different bits that I've individually drawn that I kind of like stitched together.
Oh my God. How long did it take you?
So yeah, so typically drawing each of these elements is a slightly longer and tedious process. I've been exploring the isometric drawings on Draw and that's kind of giving me a certain like pace and speed with it. So like, I don't know, if I just quickly had to like, I don't know, pull up like a canvas and just like tell you how I'm doing this very quickly because I think many people have been like asking me how I've kind of been like doing this because it looks like a lot of detail and a work to kind
It
of
looks like it
generate
took you a
on.
month at least just to create those things. That's what I feel when I look at it.
Yeah, so and I didn't have that kind of time with this project, like I said, right? So I think I usually start off with very simple like planes, like I mean just like a simple rectangle, say like you see here that I have one now. And I use this plugin which is called Fast Isometric that kind of helps me quickly just transform this into the 30-degree angle that I'm talking to you about. So you can see that here it's rotated at a 30 degrees and it's skewed. So if I just quickly hide on the grid, so I have like an overlay grid here that I've kind of inserted, which helps me maintain that 30-degree angle and kind of make everything sit in perspective. I've turned on the layers. I'm not sure if you can see this grid, but you can see all the lines are kind of moving along this same grid. So that helps because this is like an infinite canvas, and because of the level of detailing that I kind of go into, you can kind of tend to get lost in this, right? So at every level, whether it's as small as just the individual platform or plate of this pillar or say the larger decks
Oh my
of
God.
this stair, they're all following that same grid. So this is something that I use as the base foundation to kind of start illustrating. So jumping back to like how this usually begins is I create a bunch of, so it's just simple shapes and like vectors. So I have a bunch of these decks that I can kind of like quickly just transform. That helps me like say create this deck out here. And you can see I already have like a step kind of a thing right here. So I use this to kind of create the larger decks and the spatial form. And I'm just gonna turn off the grid for a bit while I need to find that. Just a minute. Yep. So I kind of create these larger platforms. So you can see there's a deck here. There's this entire block here. So I think if you jump onto the final file, which I kind of shared earlier on when we just started, you'll see them as stronger like groups and platforms. Here you can start to see that I've started grouping up these elements. So like I can move sets entirely. So that's how I'm creating kind of like multiple chunks of like decks and spaces.
Question for
And
you.
yeah,
Everything is black and white right now. There's no color.
right.
So at this point, when you're creating these illustrations, why are you purposefully making everything black and white? Why are you not adding color to it at this point?
So I think the color and the texture is a large part of the detail that comes to it. So if you see the final illustrations, it has a lot of like pattern and texture. But if I kind of started to add all of that right now, it kind of is like a pseudo filler for all the detail. I still want to end up spending time on the details in the actual form of what I'm doing. So I don't want the patterns and the colors to kind of mislead. And also, before I get into the color and the pattern and all of it, while I said I do start at the larger spatial forms, there are also initial ideas. Like I said, we had in the initial brief, it was Figma and India, right? So I think the first thing that came to my mind when I was saying I'm reimagining the Figma canvas in this 3D spatial like interface is that if you see here, I have the opacity toggle, which you will find on the right
Oh my
panel
God.
here, is kind of made into this toggle that you can drag. This is the eye picker, the eyedropper tool, right? The color picker. So I have these initial ideas that kind of spring into my mind, and this is probably a lot more, it's a micro level detail. It's not the larger form of what you see. So I know I want to have these mini stories kind of happening at different points.
Even look at that person holding that eyedropper tool. That looks like a lady, but then she's wearing some kind of like sari, not sari, but like some kind of like traditional Indian attire. Like it's not just like a typical thing. So was that intentional on your part?
Yeah, so I think with the people bit, so initially, if you see right here, I just had like, I didn't start off with people. I was just trying to explore with the geometric forms, but like, I think any illustration starts to feel a lot more real when there's people and there's activity or there's kind of some kind of motion. So that's when I kind of moved on to adding in these people. And yeah, if you see, I haven't given them all the same kind of clothes or the outfits. It would have taken me some time to kind of like draw each of these in different formats. But the idea was just to kind of like keep it as real as it can be, because you're on a file, there's 5 different people on like the Figma file. They're all not the same. They're doing different things. And I think the idea was just to kind of get that level of like informality, if I had to say. It's not fixed. I could have copy pasted 10 of these people here, but some are sitting, some are moving, and the idea is to just keep it as real as it can get.
Wow.
Yeah. So like I was saying, so these are like small mini ideas that kind of sprung up into my head as soon as I had the brief, that I wanted to include like certain of these elements, say this tool, or if you see this here, this is kind of like the prototyping link that you see between like 2 frames when you're making prototypes on Figma, right? This is,
My God.
yeah. So I think I had these mini ideas and smaller stories that I wanted to show. You have another dev ready like button that's kind of like popped here in 3D. This is the toolbar that you see. So I had all of these ideas, which are kind of like the micro level details. So while I do say I start at the macro level spatial layer, I think I have already imagined the kind of things I want to show in these tinier stories, because I think the essence of the entire illustration is in these details. The spatial aspect is just kind of just holding it together. So these are the ideas that I had, and you can see each of these are like separate sets of like very badly named groups right now here. But the idea is to kind of create these smaller, yeah, I think if I come down here, maybe you'll find some of them very randomly strewn around. But you see, I probably have some of these as ideas, they're elements, they're like things happening on the canvas. And then I start to stitch them together with the larger decks that I showed you, that I probably start like, stitching together, placing them, composing them around in this format. So I'm going to quickly come back here. So these are like the smaller scenes or stories that I create and then kind of place them. So doing this kind of also helps me move things around like modularly, right? Like it's like if I'm moving this, I have everything together. Like I want to kind of like just change the composition a bit or whatever. I have the essence of what I want, but I can kind of like play around, tweak it. I don't know, like do something like this and change the perspective. Like different things. So that just makes it easier when I have these tinier bits kind of like
Grouped together, yeah.
in bits. But yeah.
Couple of questions here. So, like at this point, when did you, after all these initial iterations, what was the iteration you arrived at that you felt like, okay, let's lock this in, and now let's start adding texture and color to this? Meaning going from low fidelity to high fidelity.
Yeah. So I think at a point when so you can see from this was one of the iterations from which I jumped to this. You can see like a lot of the other detail on the canvas is kind of stripped off from the edges. So I think we had like a bunch of quick feedback loops with the Figma team. And the idea, like I said, started off with the idea of a poster. It's like a movie poster where there's like a title hero and all of that. So out here, I had a lot happening everywhere. We kind of wanted to focus the energy on like a more finer contained area. So that's when I started kind of pushing in all the detail together. So you can see because I had this as like a module, right? You can see it was not earlier on this deck here. So because I'm able to kind of move these smaller bits together, I'm able to like kind of reshuffle, juggle the compositions together. And I kind of did this. You can see here the entire deck with the layers panel that you see here running along this flat floor was earlier somewhere else. So I've kind of moved that here, added in a few more elements like this auto here, kind of put in the trees and everything kind of contained around this. And I think this was something we were aligned down. It started to sit a lot more tightly. So then at this point, to kind of start imagining the level of detail. And if you look at this illustration, I think the India and that texture is still not coming out, although I had elements from it. So to kind of put that across, that's when I know that it's time to start jumping into like texture and pattern, because that adds a whole new level of detail. So you can see these patterns as well have a level of detail, but that is kind of not imaginable at just the black and white layer, right? So to kind of start telling the story of how I'm actually imagining even more detail and like actually even a lot of the elements from Figma are not just in these elements that are drawn, they're also in the textures. So if I come back here, you can see there's the washi tape from like Fig Jam, which is here, which is also like a pattern or texture. So like I said, so at some point, some amount of the detail and the idea is also coming in with a lot of the texture. So that's when I start putting in the color. But initially, it avoids the bias of like how it's looking and feeling. You want the idea to kind of like reach some level of foundation before I can jump to piano bits. But yeah, so like that's when you kind of start like I started putting in color and like even things like color. So I kind of was borrowing from like the Figma brand colors and like the template. So I had some kind of like patterns from which Figma had shared with me, which is like the stuff you see on like most Figma brand assets and like this is Figma when you look at it, right? So these were kind of my guiding like base themes and colors, and then I have like a bunch of things here as well, like I don't know just how the Figma interface works, right? So as I start putting in color, I probably start putting in details like the icons and all of that. Till then, you're largely seeing form, which gives you a certain level of idea. But after that, when I'm starting to like make things happen, like I started to borrow and create patterns. So on Figma Draw, I think the one thing that they brought out some time ago was you can apply patterns as a fill, right? On Figma in general, like across both the design and the draw themes. Until then, I had to treat it with kind of like an image that is like tiled repeatedly. So I knew I wanted to create these tapes as patterns. So since a lot of the detail is like in the patterns, you can see like these are also like mini patterns that kind of like fill the space. So I think borrowing from those colors and the patterns is when I start actually painting the whole picture.
Now, when I look at the textures and elements you've added here, I'm curious to know, like you've done a lot of this stuff by hand. Like I don't see anywhere where you created a bunch of components and copy pasted that. So I'm curious, like why not create everything as components so that you can just copy paste and reuse this stuff in future client projects? Why are you trying to like go the hard way and draw everything?
Interesting question. So I think when I started exploring Draw a while ago and like it was taking me time to kind of like create these individual bits, I did try creating components initially and I said I'll kind of like create a set of components that I can scale. But what started to happen with that is I start to lose the flexibility to make things look a lot different from its base. So contrary to like the traditional design process when I'm building like say an interface or something like that, where I'm making components on a day-to-day basis, you want things to belong to a part of the same system because you don't want it to look different. But on the other side, in an illustration project like this or across illustrations that I'm making, you want exactly the opposite of that. You don't want all of your illustrations or people or things to look the same. So I started to lose that control if I was working with purely just one component and I'm kind of reusing it everywhere. Like, I don't know, let me just. So if I jump back to this, the final file, if you see here, there is, just say I pick up this person, right? And if I made a component out of this, what I was struggling with is when I have a variant of this, I can't change anything within this. Say I want this person to be like another person that's probably bending or the hand is doing kind of something else. I can't do that yet right now here. So I'm going to have to use the same person. At max, I can change like color pattern, but the person is still going to be the person. But as soon as I kind of like detach this, I guess, and I don't know, I tilt the head, it looks like they're looking down. I can like change the body. So I actually think this could like become like a lot easier if variables start having more parameters. Like right now, like say rotation isn't a variable, right? Like the angle of rotation. So if it starts to do things like that, I would probably start using that. It would definitely make process more efficient. But I think right now, see, so if I want to just change a few things and I want to bring in, say, from the other illustration, I could probably just borrow the leg from this person. I don't have the flexibility of all of that here, right? Like I'm trying to create like a different person here, right? I'm just saying like different forms and like I can't do that as soon as it's a component. And I think the idea is exactly to not have all of them look the same because then it loses the beauty of the illustration. So I have a person doing something else here. I can't achieve that with a component. It helps me maintain consistency, but like I didn't want to maintain the consistency. So which is why I avoided doing the component bit. But that being said, I think as I've been illustrating more and more on Draw, I've started to build like a mini library. Like you just saw, kind of like the legs of the person from here and kind of pasted it. Maybe if I probably build a plugin and like kind of have like a mix and match of layers, it would help. And I think if definitely adding more capacity in terms of like variables that is not just limited to say like color, number, or text, would help the case here a lot more because then I can have that do a lot more.
What does your library look like?
Yeah, so I was just saying, so while I've been building this to kind of like help speeden up my workflow, I've been building a library of these random objects, things, people, plants that I'm using. So you can see these are some of the items from my previous illustrations. And like, if I come to the people, you'll find some people here as well. So they're not entirely components, they're all individual people in different postures and like forms as well.
You created all of this by hand using Draw. And
Yep.
I'm like, did you never get the temptation? Let me just buy an illustration pack or something instead of doing this all by hand myself.
Yeah, I mean, the entire idea is I'm trying to build, I have a very specific image and an idea in my head, right? As soon as it starts to become like 10 other things that you've already seen, it loses the essence of it. For example, I wanted something that's very India for the Figma illustration. So like this kind of plant, which kind of comes from the Mughal gardens, is not something I'd find. I mean, these forms are still say, maybe more generic. But if I want something like this, I think I have most control when I create it. And then I'm able to kind of like purpose this in different formats. For example, you see this is just the plant here. But if I came back to one of my initial iterations, I've kind of like overlapped it with a kind of pot here. So like I'm playing around with multiple elements. I don't have to make everything from scratch. I have these individual bits that I'm kind of building slowly along the way now that I've started designing this in my library. But yeah, so like, yeah, you can see I have the pot from here. I drawn this some time ago and I've kind of used this and this together to make this element here. So that's how I've been trying to like help build more elements that helps me gain speed. But I think the idea is not to gain speed. I enjoy the process of making things, and I think it doesn't hurt like to take more time out on this.
Now, for illustrators that are watching this video, do you think they should be worried that AI is going to replace their jobs? What have been your like just experience when you try to use like AI tools to generate illustrations?
I personally don't sense a fear here or anything that's kind of going to go wrong, like to all the illustrators. I personally do use AI as well. I think as of now, I find its use more in the earlier part of the process where I'm kind of trying to generate like quick ideas or inspirational boards, not for the final output as an illustrator. Although many of the tools do a good job at it right now as well. I've actually tried, making some of these with like some of the AI tools as well. But I think after a certain point, I stopped to have more control than it can offer me. And with this kind of level of detail, right, it probably is going to give me a larger layout or at probably this fidelity of things fairly well, and it can achieve that. But as soon as I start to go into the details of like the minuscule details of anything, like the dots here, anything, I start to lose control over it because it's either like messing something else up or it isn't speaking at that fidelity yet unless I create a lot of these smaller bits individually on AI and still come, I start to lose control over like style and detail. So I think that's where I see it finding its place in the earlier part of the process, at least for me as of now. And it is pretty, I think, cool and useful to kind of generate ideas and kind of see it in real time a lot quicker than me having to create it and then test it out. So I think it finds very good use case there. But in generating the final output, I think me having to create these is kind of like still faster and gives me a lot more control over what I want to do. And I think apart from outside of all of that, I enjoy the process of making. So even when everyone asks me like, why are you drawing each and every single thing when I can just take it off from a library or like have AI do it? I think the fun in like any real and true designer is the fact that they enjoy the process of making it. So that part of me will always still continue to make things by hand, but I've definitely started to use AI in my process to kind of help me visualize things a lot quicker.
Awesome. Got it. So, Shreya, what are the hidden Easter eggs in this final illustration that you've created?
Yeah. For example, if I were to take this paint bucket, right, which you see at this here is like a much smaller object in this entire like illustration. At the scale at which it sits in the entire illustration, so you can see that the joint or the knob that's kind of holding the handle of the paint bucket, and I could very well like not have it on my illustration, and it wouldn't change a thing at this scale. Uh, but whenever I'm kind of like creating these illustrations and like sharing them, I kind of have like zoomed in detailed snapshots of what it is, where all of these kind of like come out. And I think the beauty of it is in kind of capturing it. So the other good part about Figma is it's like an infinite canvas. I can like pretty much create like more textures and like maybe the liquid flowing thing here as well, which I haven't done yet. But as I speak, I'm like, I can maybe do that, more of that. So like it's infinite, and that helps me kind of like not restrict myself to stop at what I'm seeing, say at this level. I'm not imagining the entire illustration at this frame. I'm kind of zooming into every object and creating that. For example, I mean, if you see the illustration at this scale, you probably wouldn't notice that if I zoom into the deck here, there's this teeny dev ready button that's like a texture fill on some of these. And I could very well do without it at this scale. But I think the beauty of it is in these little details. Of course, it brings the whole thing together. But when I'm kind of like sharing or making these smaller snippets and like zoomed in snapshots, you will start to observe a lot of these things. So as I speak about it, for example, let me just jump to this file where I have this entire layers deck, right? That's kind of running across the whole, just a minute, the layers deck. And if I kind of bring this out, I could very well have chosen to, one, say not at this dev ready bit. I could also have just kept it fairly cleaner and simpler with just like a step, and I didn't have to add these details. But I think every one of these bits kind of like adds to the total, the beauty of the idea and the work that goes in it. And this one especially being like a Figma in India launch, I think like you see the level of maximalism and detail in like Indian like textiles, fabrics, architecture, everything. So I think the level of detail that I kind of aspire to put in most of my illustrations, I think fit the style and the brief of this project also very well, because the more the merrier. Sometimes less is not always more. More is less in this case.
Yes. Shreya, thank you so much for coming on Deep Dive and showing with us how you created this insane illustrations with Figma Draw.
Thank you. I had fun kind of sharing my process as well. I've been having a bunch of people asking me how I've been doing this, and I think this was like an exciting chance to kind of share this.